So you're ready to tackle that debt, huh? Looking to try out this avalanche method everyone's talking about. I get it. It sounds kind of interesting, but also maybe a bit like backwards.
Yeah. A lot of people think you should go for the small wins first, right? Knock out those little debts to feel good. But with the avalanche method, we're not about feel good, we're about results. We go straight for the big, bad debt monster, the one with the highest interest rate.
I like that debt monster. That's a good way to put it. But why does that actually work better? I mean, isn't paying off anything good?
Oh, it is. Don't get me wrong. But think of it this way, those high interest rates, they're like little money leeches, sucking away at your cash 24/7. The longer they hang on, the more they drain.
Okay, so the avalanche method is like what we're cutting off the leeches at the source.
You got it. And that's where you see the real savings come in. It's not just about paying fast. It's about being smart about which debt we attack first. Interest can really mess up your whole debt-free plan if you let it get out of control.
So this is less about speed and more about what strategy? Being clever with how we use our money.
Exactly. It's about understanding the long game, right? Making sure those interest charges don't end up costing you way more than you originally borrowed.
Right, right. Makes sense. So it's not just about the numbers, it's also like a psychological thing too, right? Like tackling the scariest debt first.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
There's a huge mental boost that comes with knocking out that big, scary debt. It can really change your whole attitude towards money. You start feeling more in control.
I can see that. It's like a weight off your shoulders, knowing that biggest debt is gone.
Totally. And that can have ripple effects. You might start being more careful with your spending or more motivated to save. It's a whole mindset shift.
It sounds like the avalanche method can really kickstart some positive changes beyond just getting out of debt. So how do we actually do it? What are the steps?
Okay, so first things first, gather up all your debt info. How much you owe on each one, what the minimum payment is, and of course the interest rate. That's the key player here.
Step one, get organized. Got it. What's next?
So now you've got your debts all lined up, it's time to prioritize. Rank them from the highest interest rate down to the lowest. That top debt, the one with the highest interest, that's our target. That's the one we're going to tackle first.
Okay, makes sense. Now, what about those minimum payments on all the other debts? We just ignore those while we're going after the big one.
No way. You absolutely got to keep up with those minimums. You don't want late fees and penalties piling up. That'll just slow us down.
Right. Definitely don't want any setbacks. So we're making the minimums on everything else, but where does all the extra money go?
All right, so this is where the magic happens. Every single extra dollar you can find, it goes straight towards that top priority debt, the one with the highest interest. Laser focus, remember.
So we're just hammering away at that one debt until it's gone.
You got it. And once that IS gone, you take the full amount you were paying, including that extra money, and roll it right into the next debt on your list.
So even though it's called the avalanche, there's kind of a snowball effect happening here too, right? As each debt gets knocked out, the amount you can put towards the next one grows bigger and bigger.
You're exactly right. It builds momentum, you start seeing real progress, and that keeps you motivated to keep going. And actually, our source material has a perfect example of how this works. Remember Sarah? She had 3 debts, right? Credit card with a crazy 18% interest, personal loan at 12%, and then student loans, which were only 5%.
Yeah, Sarah's story really helps bring this whole thing to life. I'm eager to hear how she used the avalanche method to get ahead of her debts.
Me too. It's a great illustration of how this can really work in the real world. So Sarah, she had $700 each month to throw at all these debts. After she covered the minimum payments on each, $100 for the credit card, $150 for the personal loan, and $200 for her student loans, she was left with an extra $250.
Okay, so that extra $250, that's the key, right? That's the avalanche method in action.
Right. And because that credit card had the highest interest rate, that's where that extra money went every month.
So she was paying $350 a month on that credit card until it was completely gone.
Got it. Now, besides just, saving money, what are some of the other good things about tackling debt this way?
One of the biggest things is the mental game. You're facing down that monster, that high interest debt that's been keeping you up at night. By hitting it hard, you're not just paying off a number, you're taking back control.
Yeah, it's got to feel pretty good to see that balance shrinking faster than you thought it would.
It's a huge confidence booster. You start to realize you're not a slave to debt. You can actually manage this. And, that can change your whole outlook on money.
Makes sense. It's like once you've conquered that biggest fear, everything else seems a little less scary.
Exactly. And that can lead to better habits all around. Maybe you start thinking twice about impulse purchases, or you finally open that savings account you've been putting off.
It sounds like the Avalanche Method isn't just about getting out of debt. It's like a whole personal finance makeover.
Yeah.
But let's be real. Life happens. What if some unexpected expense pops up while you're in the middle of this plan? That's a great question, and it happens to everyone. The key is to be prepared. Having an emergency fund, even a small one, can make all the difference.
So having a little cushion can help you stay on track even if things get a little bumpy.
Exactly. It's all about having a flexible plan. You got to be able to adjust when life throws those curveballs.
Speaking of adjustments, what about those tricky variable interest rates? How does the Avalanche Method work when the interest on your debts is going up and down all the time?
That's where things get interesting. If you have a debt with a variable rate that suddenly jumps way up, it might make sense to focus on that one for a bit, even if it wasn't the highest on your list originally. You got to adapt to the situation.
So even with the Avalanche Method, there's room for flexibility, right? It's not set in stone.
Exactly. The main idea is still the same. You go after the most expensive debt first. But sometimes you got to make some tactical moves to stay ahead of the game.
This is all super helpful. But before we move on, I'm curious, even for someone who's not drowning in debt right now, how can understanding the Avalanche Method help them?
That's a great point. Even if you're debt-free or just have a little bit of low-interest debt, knowing about the Avalanche Method can make you a smarter borrower in the future.
How so?
Well, it makes you really aware of the true cost of borrowing. You start paying attention to those interest rates and how much extra they can add to the price of something.
So you're less likely to get caught in those debt traps.
Right. You're more likely to think twice before charging something on a high-interest credit card or to look for lower-interest loan options. It just makes you a more informed consumer.
Knowledge is power, right? Especially when it comes to our money.
Absolutely. The more you know, the better decisions you can make. And that's what it's all about, right? Taking control of our finances and making them work for us. Now, remember, Sarah, we were talking about how much she could potentially save with the Avalanche Method.
Yeah, those savings can really add up, can't they?
Oh, definitely. By tackling that high-interest credit card first, she could easily save hundreds, maybe even thousands of dollars in interest charges compared to other methods.
That's a lot of money. Just imagine what you could do with all that extra cash. Travel, investments, early retirement, or just enjoying a little more financial freedom.
Right. It's about reclaiming that money that would otherwise be wasted on interest and putting it towards your goals, whatever those may be. Now, I know some of our listeners are probably thinking, okay, this sounds great, but how do I actually figure out what my potential savings could be?
Right. They want to crunch the numbers and see how this would work for them. What resources would you recommend?
There are some great online debt calculators out there. Just search for Avalanche Method calculator and you'll find tons of options. You can plug in your own numbers and see exactly how much interest you could save.
Perfect. And of course, we'll be sure to link to some of those in the show notes for easy access.
And you know, another great resource is a financial advisor. They can help you create a personalized plan and answer any questions you have.
That's a good point. Sometimes it helps to have a pro in your corner. So to sum it all up, the Avalanche Method, it's a pretty smart way to tackle debt, but it's not for everyone, right?
Right. It's not a one-size-fits-all solution.
Yeah.
The important thing is to understand how it works, see if it fits your situation, and be ready to adjust if you need to.
Awesome. Well, this has been a super insightful deep dive into the Avalanche Method. I think we've given our listeners a lot to think about. But before we go, I want to leave you with one last question to ponder. Even if you're not struggling with a ton of high-interest debt right now, how can understanding this method change the way you think about money and the choices you make in the future?
That's a great question to think about. It really gets at the heart of what we've been talking about today. Being intentional with your finances, understanding the impact of interest, and taking control of your money instead of letting it control you.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And on that note, we'll wrap things up for today. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.